All right, so today the main purpose will be to maybe give you a little bit more introduction about this course. Especially, I want to draw more connection to what we said, safety critical system, formal methods, and also the two different approaches of doing theorem proving versus model checking. That's something I will also like to go through with you right in the beginning of the course. And then the plan will be to do it just for today. I think that should be enough. And then next Monday, we'll do a little bit of the review on predicate logic. And that could be a little bit repetition from 3342. Doesn't really hurt because when we talk about program verification later in the course, we also need knowledge. So it's definitely worth doing that upfront. Okay. And before we go back to the materials, let's now just do the usual stuff I like to do. Just some announcement reminder. Okay. Just before that, do you guys got any question from course syllabus that we spend the entire class on Monday, right? Anything unclear to you? All right. If no, that's good. Let's just continue. All right. The most important stuff, guys. Before that, yes.
It's not exactly syllabus, but it's adjacent. This course was moved to this time from another time, and that created a conflict with the Lab of 4413. How is that going to be accommodated?
Yeah, so so I do understand that a small number of you guys, of course, will make sure we attend to it. Can you please maybe speak to me right after the class, and then let's talk about exactly what a conflict is. I'm definitely aware, but I'm not exactly sure about the detail. We'll talk about it. Okay, good. Thank you. All right, good. All right, the most important stuff is, guys, please watch out. Your lab number 1 has been released. And let me just go over all the announcements and reminder. They're pretty short. And then I would like to just spend a little bit of time in the beginning just to go over with you about the lab number 1 instruction. Maybe not to the contents of that, but just give you some guidance about how you should really be more efficient in completing it. And lab number 1 is mainly about to spoon feeding you about how to use the TLA Plus tool and also get used to the Pascal specification language. It looks like a programming language, but it's really for specification, for model checking. I'll definitely talk about it. And there are also several resources I would like you to also be aware of, and you will be expected to also explore them beyond this lab as well. That's also going to help you on the course. Okay, I'll get to the instruction in just one moment. It's already on the e-class. And your scheduled lab session will be from tomorrow. No TA, but myself, I will be there tomorrow, 9 a.m. Optional, your lab number 1 is pretty much self-guided. In theory, you don't really need my supervision, but I will be there anyway for 1 hour. In Lausanne 1006, your lab location. If you want to just come and speak to me, or maybe you get stuck already by following through the lab number 1, just come. And then I'll be there answering your question. As I said, there's no clash with my schedule with your lab, so I should be able to make it for every week. I'll try. Okay. So tomorrow, 9 a.m., hopefully to see some of you, or all of you. We'll see. My office hour, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it will start from today. So if you want to speak to me, welcome to. And we're going to do some trial attendance on iClicker today, as I said, right? So today is only for trial attendance. So just to make sure everybody is kind of familiar with the process. Okay? And then starting from next Monday, we'll start doing the real thing, right? So for today, let's take the opportunity to practice how to do it. And we are not going to, most likely, I will not be able to get to math review today. But if you look at the lecture site, over here, you will see the math review over here has been posted. And that one there, in some ways, is more like a subset of what you learn in 3342, just to cover the very basics about predicate logic, propositions, some useful theorems, etc. So that one shouldn't take us more than 1 or 1.5 class to really finish that, right? A little bit of repetition, as I said, but it's definitely worth brushing up. Because for many of you, it's been a year since you took 3342. So maybe I will assume you forgot about everything, right? So we'll do that, but the slides is already there, and you can feel free to take a look over the weekend before the next class. It will definitely be beneficial. Okay. All right, let me go back here. All right, so that's about the slides here. And then this is something I may not bother you with announcement every time, but as I mentioned before, so starting from this class, you will see that there are 2 iPad notes linked over here. Usually the left one is going to be the annotated version I actually deliver in the class. That usually, well, currently it's not there because we are still having the class. It will be available when I post the recording. On the other hand, you can expect about hopefully 1 hour, within 1 hour before the class, this link will be activated. If you click on that, you will see the blank version of the notes, which I'm going to go over, right? Things like that, right? It's basically just clean. So for those of you who may want to print it out or you want to load to your tablet, feel free, okay? Optional, if you find it useful. I know at least for some of you, it will be useful. That's something I'll try to do every class. So I only sent you an announcement today. So later on, maybe I wouldn't bother you with this announcement. So you can assume it should be there, okay? All right, so the last thing to really mention is about the room. So it turns out the class that clashes with us, they make a mistake. I double checked with the undergrad office. So our Monday lecture venue should remain to be Ross Building North, 203, just the same room. So we don't really change. If they're still there, of course, we're gonna let them know they're in the wrong room, all right? All right, so now the plan would be I want to go over Lab 1 instruction a little bit with you, just to make sure you understand the overall idea for Lab number 1, which is fundamental, right? Before that, any questions? You want me to clarify? All right. And how do you find Lab number 1? If you log into eClass, you will see that under Lab instructions over here, right? You can see Lab number 1 instruction, right? If you open that, it's a single PDF, and that's it. There's no starter code for you to download. You're going to create everything from scratch, according to the instruction. I'll go over instruction with you. And you will see there is another PDF over here. It's called the Pascal TLA Plus data sheets, or it's called the cheat sheets. So this is the PDF document which I listed also as part of the resources for the lab. So this is the PDF that will be made available to you during the 2 programming tests. So that one there basically summarizes all the common syntax for Pascal, which is the language you're going to use during the lab test, during the programming test. So I would suggest maybe while you're completing the lab, try to get yourself very familiar about how to find information about the different syntax for Pascal, so that during the programming test, hopefully you don't really have to refer to it too frequently, which is not a good sign, right? So, but if you forget about certain syntax, that's your only guide. So if you ask the TA or myself during the programming test about how to fix certain error, sorry, we cannot help. So this will be the only document you have. All right, so please make sure you get yourself familiar. You got lots of time to get familiar with this document. Only about 15 pages, it's not much. All right, so I'll leave the exploration to you, but if you got any question about somewhere, let me know. But I don't think you will need all the construct over here. Just get yourself familiar about what's there. All right, so let's now, okay, so you know where things are. And later on, if I post, when I post the solution for labs, it will also be under this section here, okay? All right, let's now talk about lab number 1, okay? All right, so your lab number 1 is going to be about using the TLA Plus toolbox. So there are 2 options for you. You can either install that on your machine. I believe for Mac, for Windows, or even for Linux, they do have the versions there for you to install. However, it's not required if you want to work on the labs or extra exercises on your machine. On the other hand, on the remote lab, we do have the installed version already, right? So that's really something you can assume that will always be there. And also that's the version we're going to use during the programming test. So the version we haven't really updated the version for TLA Plus toolbox, but I don't think they really got frequent updates anyway. So the version we are having now on the remote lab is back on winter 2023. That one is pretty stable version. So I think for what we need you to learn for this course, that version should be sufficient. But if you happen to download the latest version, that should be fine too, right? I don't think there's any conflict. All right, you choose which version you want to work on. But I would suggest if you actually try to use the version that you download to your machine, maybe before you submit for your lab, you may just want to double check that all the assertions, all the model checking assertions will actually still work on the version in the lab, right? If there's any problem, you want to discover that as early as possible, because that will be the version you're going to use in the programming test. Okay. And then you're going to learn about how to specify And here, the specification language that you're going to learn is called Pascal. All right, so that's a language you are going to get familiar with for both programming tests. And also for the subsequent lab number 2, 3, and 4, we're all going to use Pascal. Okay, so this will be the chance to learn it for the first time. And also, we're going to do something called checking as opposed to proving. All right. And I will give you some, as I promised, I'll give you some small example about some integer counter to show to you exactly what I meant by checking versus proving. So for proving, you guys learned about how to do deductive proofs using some inference rule. I'll give you some small example as well, so just to brush up. That's what you learned back in 3342. And for the checking over here is going to be the focus for 4315, the current course. The good news is, for proving back in 3342, the proof itself is manual, which means you got to decide which rules to really apply. You know, you got a sequence proof, a sequence of inference rule applications. On the other hand, for the checking in this course, it's automated, meaning that it's only a button click you have to apply. And then the tool is going to tell you, roughly speaking, it's going to tell you either the properties you want to check pass or fail, and there is another third option. Simply means the tool gets too busy, it just cannot conclude. That's something I'll talk a little bit more about. Because whenever you do checking, it's possible you may run out of memory because you got too many states to check. All right, so that's something we'll get to. And the example you're gonna try to develop is something called bridge controller. I'm pretty sure that rings the bell somehow, right? That's what you guys learned in 3342. But we are not gonna do the very complicated refinement model, just the very initial one, okay? Just to get some feel about how you can do things rather than in Rodin, like you can now do in a different toolbox. All right, so you can feel free to distribute your lab to your personal GitHub, maybe after the semester, but for now, during the semester, please keep it private. Okay, that's just the policy. But after the semester, you can feel free to show off your achievement if you want to. All right, let's now go over some learning outcomes, but that's something you will achieve anyway, so you can take a look. And the way to, so there are actually two possible ways to launch the TLA Plus toolbox. If you want to do from the command line, you simply type this command and %, make sure that's run in the background. Or you can actually click on the GUI icon on the remote lab, which I believe I illustrated in the tutorial video, but I'll show you in the lab tomorrow anyway. It's pretty easy to find, okay? Just save you some typing, but either way. All right, so that's the link for remote lab. You can just go there and it's already there. And I'm pretty sure all of you got EECS account, so that may not be an issue, but I just include it for your information anyway. All right, so that's the optional part. You can definitely try to install the TLA Plus toolbox on your machine. So here are certain instructions. We'll try to help you if you got any issue with installing, but we'll try our best. No guarantee, right? Just show up to the lab if you got any trouble. Just come to us earlier than later. All right, so the background problem, you can read it, but it's basically going to be about module, right? If you remember back in 3342, when you try to define stuff in Rodin, you need context and machine, right? So in TLA Plus, luckily, just module. So once you create individual module, usually just one module with different functions or procedures like there. And once you get a module defined, you're going to somehow build a state machine automatically from the module. From there, you can do model checking. Right? That's something you will see as well in the tutorial, just to show you the whole process. So there will be tutorial videos for you to watch. So that's why I said it's more like a spoon feeding kind of style for lab number 1. But for later labs, you will be on your own to actually rely on your knowledge that you learned from lab number 1. And guys, sorry, tutorial videos, about 4 hours in total. That's why I gave you guys 2 weeks to actually complete lab number 1. You can feel free to do any tricks you like. You can only maybe try to speed up the video by 4 times, 2 times, or you can try to only look at the transcript from the YouTube video, whatever you like. I don't care, right? As long as you learn the stuff. However, for the lab submission, you will be required to type whatever module I type on the video and reproduce it, right? But you can feel free to fast forward and take a screenshot and then try to type it from there. Doesn't matter. As long as you learn the stuff, I'll be happy. All right. So tutorial videos to watch, I'll show you the link. And then and the one you're gonna build will be the bridge control system, just to see how to apply the syntax. And you'll learn the more complicated stuff, like especially, for example, like loops in lab number 2. Okay, that's something you will do later. Okay, Pascal. All right, good. And for the resources, you can take a look at here, and also here. You can explore that yourself. And this is the PDF I just mentioned. It's already on the e-class. That's the PDF that will be made available to you during the lab test. Okay. Okay. And then the next section will be the task. What you gotta do is you gotta click on this link over here. Okay, I'll show you very quickly. Okay. If you actually go to Lab 1 instruction over here and go to the section for, oh, by the way, the deadline over here, really important, right? This is the only place I'll mention about the deadline for your lab. It's released today, and you got until midnight, right before the midnight, on Thursday, January 23rd. So I make it just the same day as your scheduled lab. So you can still come to the scheduled lab for the last minute help on that particular day, and then you can submit afterwards, right? It's still got enough time. So time should not be an issue. Just make sure you start early and make steady progress about to learn. Okay, let me show you this link here, which is important. Okay, if you click on that, so this is the section of the tutorial you're gonna follow. Okay, and there is also the annotated notes you can also download, print out. So that's also the one I illustrated on the video over here, just to show to you how we analyzing. Do you remember the E description, R description from 3342? Right? It's about environmental versus functional requirements, right? You can take a look. It's a nice recap. And also about how you can build the initial model, some state diagrams, some logic, and also how you can develop the module. Okay, make sure you really follow through the process of creating the module. That's something you will have to do from scratch during the programming test. And some anatomy of the module structure here, and also Pascal. Okay, and there will be some trick you have to notice. Every time when you try to, before you can do the check, you have to make sure you regenerate the Pascal and translate it into TLA plus. May not make much sense to you, but you will see that once you do it. All right, just make sure you understand the stuff. And then more about how you can kind of see how the model checking is going to work behind the scene. And there's one final diagram I want you to really pay attention to. All right, this one here. Okay, this one here. So this is something you haven't really seen in 3342. All right. So this is the so-called state graph based on whatever system you're building. In the case of the initial bridge controller model, we can already generate reasonably complicated state graph over here. So for this one here, you don't need to draw yourself. It's generated automatically. And once you got this one here, you will see that I will explain to you how to interpret the diagram. And also, whenever you want to do some model checking, if the check failed, it's actually going to give you a certain so-called trace on the diagram to show to you how the system actually failed. For example, the invariance. That's something you want to pay extra attention to. Because during the programming test, my student, well, back in winter 23, they told me that it's actually quite useful to really generate this diagram here on the fly during the test. So if you run into any logical issue for your developed Pascal program, you can use this one for debugging. Right? Just keep that in mind. And of course, during the programming test, once I give you the example instruction, I'll also show to you. There will be instruction included during the test to remind you how to generate this diagram. It's pretty straightforward once you follow. All right. Yeah, okay. And then there are certain exercises I want you to also try to complete. And then don't worry too much about if you're not getting that 100% correct. We just want your true and best attempt before the submission deadline. And make sure you submit in time. And then after the submission deadline, shortly after that, I'll give you the solution. And then we can maybe talk briefly about it in class or maybe during the scheduled lab. All right. And these are the videos to watch. And the state diagram that I just talked about, more about TLA plus, etc., is around part D over here. So pay more attention to part D. But don't just jump there directly. You need other parts, prior to that in order to understand what's going on. All right, good. Okay, let's now just continue. Yeah, as I said, about 4 hours. I really wouldn't recommend you only try to watch those, spend those 4 hours the day before the due date. You wouldn't, you can definitely do it. It's doable. 4 hours is not that long. But you really want to take time to really watch the video chunk by chunk and then take some notes, digest the material, because they will also be covered in your written test or eventually the exam as well. So take some good notes. So it will definitely help you review the stuff later. Right? That's my suggestion. All right. And there is some certain tips over here you can also refer to when you actually try to build one of the modules. Okay. Okay, so for submission, pretty straightforward. You just gotta click on the link over here. And that one there should already set up the course, the turn, the assignments, everything is there. And you will just have to make sure when you submit, unlike in 3342, where you're gonna export your project into a zip. You don't do that in this course. In some ways, easier. You will have to somehow upload the individual module files. So here you will see the module file has the extension TLA. Right? So that's the individual module file you have to submit. And during the programming test, you may have to submit one or more module files individually. So you got to make sure you practice the process and don't miss any file for submission, for grading. All right, so eventually you got to submit 3 files in total. Make sure you get familiar with how to browse, etc. All right, and then if there's any clarification I need to make about the lab, I'll definitely let you know, and then I'll put in this particular section. All right. All right, guys, any general question about the lab? All right, hopefully that's enough guidance for you. Yeah, go ahead.
So for tomorrow's lab,
yeah.
you would recommend we watch the 4-hour tutorial video the day before and try to understand it and take notes on it. So then when we go into the lab, we have an idea about what needs to be done. And then it would be due the day of the lab, but just before midnight, right?
Yes, that's correct. So it's definitely not due tomorrow. So I would say if you really plan to, I would say this, how about this? Why don't you guys try to get started right away today sometime? Maybe start watching as much as you can for the videos. If you somehow get stuck at certain points, maybe just drop by tomorrow and ask me. That might be the best way. Or if you just want to get started tomorrow, that's also fine. Maybe just watch the video in the lab using your laptop. In the lab machine, I'm not too sure if you can use headset. Maybe you can. I'm not too sure. Anyways, so watch the video during the lab. Whenever you get stuck on something, if I'm there, just ask me. That might be the best way. Yeah. And starting from not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday, there will be another TA also be there to also help. Question?
Yeah, do we have to come into the lab?
The lab is optional, so you don't need to come in. You don't get any penalty. Also, you don't get any bonus by coming to the lab. Right? But it's I'm there just to answer your question. That's the main purpose. As I said, when we take iClicker attendance, it's only for lecture, not for the lab. Okay? Don't feel pressure about coming to lab, but if you really need it, just don't wait for too long. Okay, so that's about lab number 1. And guys, please, again, don't forget it's going to be due on this particular day by the midnight. Okay, that's crucially important. If you miss the deadline, no excuse, 0. But if you submit before the deadline, you got 100. All right, it's that simple. All right, good. If no further question, why don't we try to cover some stuff? And so today, let me see. So let me cover some stuff. Maybe we can do another 20 minutes or so, and then we can take a short break by taking attendance. That's what I usually do. Again, today's attendance doesn't count. It's only for practice. And then, yeah, that'll be it. Okay, let's cover some stuff, maybe for another 20 minutes or so. All right, so last time we actually went over about safety critical system, the definition, and also we also gave you some example. You can definitely think about what other example you can think about. That might be kind of the system you have to work with upon your graduation. All right, so this slide here is also very important about since it's software engineering degree you're studying, so very likely you might be interested in being licensed as a professional engineer once you graduate. Because certain jobs, they do require the practitioner to be licensed. And every province in Canada, and also maybe in the US, in other countries, they have their own way of licensing their own engineers. But I'll just give you some idea. So there's a concept called Code of Ethics, which will be some rules that you're supposed to comply with as a professional engineer. Okay, let's now take a look. So Code of Ethics is simply just some professional conduct you have to comply with respect to the society, your boss, your clients, and also your colleagues, right? So you gotta make sure if you're going to work in the professional engineering profession, you have to make sure you comply with it. So I just give you some bullet points here. You gotta be fair, you gotta be loyal, also you gotta be dedicated, also you gotta be have high ideals, integrity, right? And the one that's gonna be more relevant to 3342 and 4315 will be number 4 and number 5, right? Something about knowledge and also competence. You can think about the course learning outcomes that I went over with you the other day, well, back on Monday. So that one is more about a list of knowledge topics that you're supposed to know by the end of the course. So that's about the knowledge part. You should be knowledgeable before you can engineer some working system, okay? And also competence will be more about the get your hands dirty. So you want to make sure you can also use some industrial strength tool like a TLA Plus or Rodin to actually do the stuff, right? So knowledge and competence. And misconduct, right? So this is to say if you try to build a bridge controller, let's say, at the end of the day, before you declare the bridge is fit for use for other people to cross their cars by, you have to sign. You have to put your name as a stamp on the certification documents. If the bridge somehow collapses, you will be held responsible for sure, right? So that's why, depending on the product you're working with, if that one is not exactly safety critical, you might be okay, right? But anyway, so I'm just talking about the more serious scenario. What will be the consequence of misconduct? If you're lucky, you might just get your license suspended. I'm pretty sure you can reinstate that maybe later, right? But the more serious consequence will be you might get a lawsuit and go to jail, right? So that's something to watch out for. And for those of you who might be interested, you can also click on this link here. That one is the professional engineers for Ontario. Pretty relevant to us since we are not in Ontario. And you can, for those of you who might be interested in becoming licensed, you can definitely take a look at what's the process of getting licensed as a professional engineer. For you guys, since you studied the engineering degree, usually all your degree requirements already cover all the required subjects to get licensed. So you might just have to maybe submit maybe some experience record and maybe take some ethics and law exam. That'll be it. In my case, I didn't study engineering degree. I only got licensed after my computer science degree. So that will take a little bit longer process to really justify the relevant experience. But anyway, so everybody got different case. Take a look if that could be relevant to your future career. Okay. All right, so now let's talk about developing safety critical system. All right, so the main two criteria I want to repeat again, which I normally mentioned already in 3342, but let's just brush up quickly. So there are industrial standards, which usually they are proprietary, which means if you simply Google for that, you don't really get open access to them. So you need to purchase them. So maybe for the company that you're going to work with, once you graduate, the company may have already purchased these standards for you to consult with. But for now, I'll just mention their names. And if you're really interested in learning more about these standards, there are usually some second-hand resources online. So you can go to the library website and just type the standard name. There might be some paper discussing these standards rather than the standard itself. So you can definitely take a look too. Not required, optional. So we're talking more about mission or safety critical. I haven't really talked about the distinction between these two, but I will do that in a moment. So in the aviation domain, building airplanes, of course, is a very serious subject, right? They have this standard over here, right? Which will specify how you're supposed to build airplanes that are safe and fit for use. Another domain will be the nuclear domain. That's basically what Ontario Power Generation's OPG will have to satisfy the nuclear domain. Okay. And let's now talk about the criteria. The two criteria will be, we want to make sure the requirements are precise and complete. So these are the two. I'll just mention the bullet points, and I'll give you a little bit of further details. And also, the implementation should really conform to the requirements. So these are two things over here that we're talking about. All right. Let's now do a little bit of elaboration on these two criteria. Okay. Let's now talk about. Okay, good. Okay, let's now talk about criteria. So we are really talking about acceptance criteria. Okay, the number one over here is more about requirements. And we say the requirements must be valid, or it's more like a validation. So validation of requirements. And the validation itself is not going to be covered much in 3342 or in this course, but you guys should have already learned that in your, is it 4312, your requirements engineering course, right? 4312, yeah. Okay. That's something you can definitely refer to. That's really what the course is about, how you can make sure your requirements itself is really what the customers wants. Okay. And the two things I talk about there is about precise and complete. Okay, very quickly. Okay, so we talk about it should be, number one, precise. And also it should be complete, right? Of course, they're covering different aspects. When we say precise, that means it should be subject to no multiple interpretation. It should be interpreted in a single way. There should be no ambiguity. So when somebody sees your requirements document, let's say two designers or two implementers see your requirements, they should really build the same system with the same functionality, rather than one person building one way, the other person building the other way, right? Should be precise. That means it should be no scope of different interpretation. Interpretations by different engineers. And this one is actually very challenging, because when you took 4312, you will know that the way for you to come up with a requirements document in the first place is by talking to a human, like your customer. So natural language, it's inherently imprecise and very ambiguous. So that's why it's a big challenge. Okay, just be aware. Okay. So number one, you should know natural language which usually is the language by your customer, poses big challenge. That's why this the process called requirements elicitation. You just have to go back and forth, right, with your customer. Okay, just be aware. And in 3342 and 4315, we do provide with you some option over here. So the way we're going to specify, or to at least to clarify the requirements, is by using mathematics. If you ask about what would be the most precise language to specify requirements, math, because math is subject to no other interpretation. Okay, mathematics. Okay, let me say a little bit more. And in 3342, and you guys learned about something called event B, right? You will see some small example just for the introductory part, and because we don't really cover event B anymore in this course. Event B, you remember you got axioms, you got variables, you got constant, right? Things like that using predicate. And in 4315, you got TLA plus, or you can think more about TLA plus as a way to specify transition system. That's something you will see when you try to follow through the tutorial in lab number 1. You remember that graph I could talk about, right? Transition system. Okay, and when we talk about temporal logic, which we'll do after the review on the predicate logic, temporal logic is really built upon transition system. That's something we'll talk a lot about. So don't worry too much if that doesn't really make any sense to you yet. All right, that's about preciseness. And for complete over here, that simply means you have to really cover all the possible input scenario. There should not be a particular input scenario that you simply have no response from your computer system, right? All the input scenario should have some well-defined response by the computer system that you're building. Right, so these two terms are very important. Just keep them in mind. So as you try to practice maybe later when you dive into the industry, okay? All right, so that's about validation, right? Validation. And I'll also show you guys some diagram pretty soon to put these two ideas together into some diagram. Okay, I'll do that pretty soon. All right, the second part here is just about the implementation should really conform to the requirements, okay? And that one there is called verification. And that one there is called verification of implementation. Right? So you can see here the focus is more about the system you actually have already built. You're basically asking, assuming that my requirement has been validated already, it's precise and it's complete. Am I really building exactly this product over here? All right. And there's another saying, which you will also see in the slides. Okay. The way to understand point number 1 about validation is, are we building the right products? Are we building the right product? On the other hand, for number 2 over here, are we building the product right? Okay, notice the difference here. Okay, are we building the product right? All right, so these two are very different, but they kind of related questions. Just remember, one is about requirements, the other one is about implementation. All right, and let me just say one more thing here, and then you will see more when I show you the diagram. In order to really verify implementation, it's also a very big challenge, because usually when you talk about the requirements, also requirements, I'm talking about requirement over here, versus the implementation. But implementation has to be developed using some programming language, Java, C, Python, you name it. So these two are said to be incompatible, okay? You cannot directly take one requirement and take some Java program and try to compare them directly. You will need some intermediate work that's done behind the scene. Okay? So what we said was these two belong to different semantic domain. They belong to different semantic domains. So you might hear about this term about semantic domain quite often, right? So what will be the solution then? If two things are actually in different semantic domain, try to translate them into the same semantic domain. That's the intuitive solution. And to really do this, you have to know how to implement a compiler. Again, that's outside the scope of this class, okay? And the solution will be you have to somehow, you have to implement a compiler to turn them into the same semantic domain. Yeah, sorry about the fonts over here, but hopefully it's still readable. All right, just some idea about acceptance criteria. Okay. But luckily, for this course, you're not required to implement a compiler. Whenever you want to translate what was really described to you in English, you can just do the translation in your mind. That's okay, right? But for those of you who may want to do a little bit more serious work about verification, you will have to know how to implement a compiler. Okay, that's something will be up to your self-study. Okay. Okay, so let's now go back here. Well, there's two criteria here. Okay, so that's good. I'll get to the diagram. Is it here? That'll be the next one. Okay, let's talk about mission critical. How about this? Since I think it would make more sense if I talk about that diagram right away. Okay, and then I'll talk about the distinction between these two. There we go. Okay. All right, so these are the stuff I just mentioned, right, about validation. We want to make sure it's precise and also it's complete, right? There's another thing about contradiction, meaning that sometimes customer might tell you, I want P and I want not P together in my product, which you know, P and not P will be false, contradictory, right? Maybe they said, I want my source code to be well protected for our product, to be proprietary. At the same time, they want the system to be open sourced. Apparently it's P and not P, right? Cannot be satisfied at the same time. All right, let's now try to relate implementation, requirements, documents, and also validation, and also a little bit about compiler, just to show you some error. Let's now talk about something called commuting diagram. Okay, let's just now put everything together, and then we'll talk about safety critical versus mission critical. Okay, and the diagram, let me just look at my notes here. Okay, good. Let's start with the implementation. So you have some implementation on the one end. And the implementation may be done in different programming language, whichever you choose. So it could be Java, could be Python, just for example. All right, so that's your implementation, right? You got some programs, or you got a package, or you like a project. And you also got your requirements documents on the other hand. So implementation, I just want to highlight it, right? Implementation here. Let's say requirements documents. Let me put it a little bit further. So we got requirements documents. So this document here should really detail about what the customer really wants, right? And of course, that will be the requirements. And of course, it may not be a single document. It could be multiple documents, or it can be a repository of documents, or it can be a subversion, like a GitHub history about the evolution of the requirements, right? Just in general. And verification is really about whether or not your implementation actually conforms to the requirements documents, basically, right? Conceptually. You're asking about whether or not it conforms. So this is really about verification. All right, so that's the first thing that you want to be clear. Right? Verification really involves the implementation and also the requirements documents. Right? What about validation? Validation, if you want to put in a diagram, is more like a self loop. You're basically asking about this document by itself. Is the document precise? Is it complete? Right? You can use different technique. You can use the technique formally, which I'll show you. You have to do a little bit manual, you got to do some translation, or you can just do the elicitation that you learned from 4312. Okay. So here, let me put it here. So it's more like a self loop, right? So this one you're asking whether it's precise, is it complete, or is there any contradiction? Contradictory, right? So these are the typical questions you can ask when you try to analyze if the requirements document is actually valid. So that one there is validation. All right, so that's validation over here. Okay, I can change that to yellow. It might work better. Okay, validation. This is only about the conceptual level. You got your implementation, you got requirements. But how can we actually engineer the process to really make it automated, make it work? So the way to do that would be you have to somehow, let me just do one more thing here. As I said earlier, the biggest challenge is these two things are in different semantic domains. You just cannot take some arbitrary Java code and some arbitrary documents written in English and ask directly, is one conforming to the other? You just cannot do that directly because they are simply got different meanings. They got to be compatible in order for you to answer that question. So you want to, first of all, let me just put this one here. So these two things pose a very big challenge, which disallow you to really compare them directly. All right. Not in the same semantic domain, right? So these two are not, right? That's a bigger challenge. That's the challenge we have to resolve if you want to do any industrial strength case study. If you want to solve any real problem, you really have to resolve this challenge. To resolve it, the idea, I'm going to draw that out, but just before that, let me do a little bit of preview. You somehow have to translate this guy here into something. And translate this guy here into also something. And these two things will be in the same semantic domain. Maybe they're simply specified using the same language. Maybe both boxes are specified using Rodin. Maybe both boxes are specified using Pascal in TLA+. So they will be in the same semantic domain. And once you got these two boxes in the same semantic domain, you will be able to take advantage of the tool that's already there for you. Okay? So let's now give a little bit more detail. So think about you're going to now transform or translate this one over here into something here. So you're going to translate that into some formal model. You can say translate, or you can say transformed. Doesn't matter. Or you can even say compiled. All right? And this arrow over here, in you guys' context for this course in 3342, this process here is manual. You just use your brain to see how things should be corresponding to the corresponding formal model. But in real application, you may have to implement a compiler for that. All right? So that's why I also put compile over here. And just for you guys' information, and for those of you who might be interested, let me sell myself a little bit, right? So EECS4315 is really something you can take advantage of, right? I'll just show you guys very quickly. Again, it's not required, just for your reference. If you go back to the lectures page, I'll show to you, okay? Just go to the top. You will see that there is a 4302 over here. Let me give you, the latest version was back in fall 2022. And then there is a tutorial here about Antler 4. So this is how you can build a compiler in Java. Okay, for those of you who might be interested, you can check this out, okay, for your knowledge, if you want to learn about how to build a compiler. And building a compiler is not just applicable to our context in 4315. Compiler is a very general technology to transform one thing into another. As long as you can define the grammar for the input yourself, you will be able to transform it. For example, you may say, I want to translate Java code into SQL tables. You can use a compiler to do that. And there are people doing that as well. All right. Anyway, that's optional, just for your knowledge. Okay, Antler4. It's a very commonly used so-called parser generator. Right. Let's not go deep into it. All right. So let's go back to more relevant to this course. All right. So we got a formal model here, and then so the formal model here in 3342, we actually got the event B context, and also we got the machine, right? In rodent, you got context, you got machine. Of course, in the context, you got constants, you got axioms. In the machine, you got variables, invariants, and also events, right, etc. Right? But in 4315, you actually got modules and also procedures in Pascal. But they are both formal models because somehow they will be turned into something that's checkable or provable. Right? All right, so that's about one end over here. Okay, so there is another end which we also got to do. For requirements document, you can also translate, compile the relevant part into the same semantic domain. Okay, the same. Okay, you can think about whatever I said over here, also applicable here. Okay, let me now repeat. All right, so here, this will be the formal property. And the formal property, as you learned in the 3342, and also in this course as well, something called invariance, which is a Boolean condition that has to be true all the time. If you find any time where invariant is not true, there's some problem there. Okay, you will see that also in lab number 1. So we got invariant. There's another one called deadlock freedom, right? That's also something we mentioned earlier. That could be another property. For example, deadlock freedom, right? Just an example here. So these two are in the same semantic domain. Okay, let me see. Okay, these two will be in the same semantic domain. These two will be in the same semantic domain, which means they will be analyzable. The same semantic domain. All right. And the final arrow I'm going to put will be between these two. From formal model and also to the formal property, since they will be specified by the same language, for example, event B or maybe Pascal, you will be able to use the develop tool to really check it. All right. So this will be the check or proof process. All right. So why do we call this a commuting diagram? Commuting diagram basically tells you if you want to go from here to here directly, challenging, because not in the same semantic domain. Instead, what you can do is, I can say, I will translate this into here. And translate into here, I can still try to achieve the same goal in a different way, in a different path. That's why it's called commuting. You're commuting in a different way. This diagram here is very valuable. It really summarizes what we're doing in 3342 and 4315. Of course, the only thing that we don't really cover is about how you can implement a compiler, right? We cannot really do that. We only got 12 weeks. That's it. Okay. Oh, one more thing, and then I will move on. And of course, when we talk about validation over here, of course, once you get a property here, you can just put any additional property that you want to check. That's also validation, right? So this one here, you can think about this one here. You can simply just get more properties to check in order to validate, right? You can just add more properties. All right, good. Just keep that in mind. We're going to follow the same approach also for this course. like what we did in 3342. Okay. Guys, any questions? Okay, good. Good. All right, let me see. Let me do one more thing about the distinction between mission critical and safety critical, and then we'll take a short break. Okay. Okay, about mission critical and safety critical, very simple definition, but I just want to highlight to you certain parts in the documents on my iPad, and then that'll be it. Okay, critical, that simply means important. The success of the task you're trying to do is critical if without it, you'll be disastrous. Okay, critical. For example, pacemaker will be very critical because failing it, the human may die if they wear that pacemaker. And safety, that means it has to do with the life of humans. And also mission. So we talk about safety versus mission. So safety usually has to do with the human lives, but mission, not necessarily. It might just mean may relate to something that costs a lot or something that's actually kind of crucial to achieve something else, right? So just different. Okay, before we get to here, let's now talk about this document here. And this one here, just one example document you can definitely refer to. Okay, you can refer to this link here, but I already got an extract from you. I want to go over some definition here with you quickly. Okay. So we talk about safety, we talk about critical, and also what the consequence is for failure. I'll leave you to read that. Okay, it's pretty easy to read. Okay, but let's now take a look at this one here. So, safety critical system demand software that has been developed using a well-defined, mature software development process. In our case, formal methods. We're using mathematics to develop that. If you want to build system that's very safety or mission critical, the standard or the process you're using to develop that should be very high standard, should be very high. Okay? That's really what this is saying. And how do we actually distinguish between safety critical versus mission critical, right? I want you to take a look at something called criticality levels. You also hear that term quite often in the industry, criticality. Okay? So we got different levels over here. So this one here is about this. So criticality level is really about the consequence of a failure of your system. Okay? If I tell you that if the system you're supposed to develop fail, it has no effects. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. If that fails, it has no effects, that means it's not very critical, right? If I say it fails, it sounds somehow minor, or maybe it can be major, or maybe it can be severe, or it can be catastrophic. That's really the term they use in the industrial standard. Apparently, you can see there is an increasing level of critical level, right? Over here, okay? So accordingly, we can now define safety critical versus mission critical. You will see that in the paragraph over here. Let me show to you. Let's see. There is about, oh, there we go, sorry. So safety critical software is typically A or B. If I tell you that if your system fails, it's going to be catastrophic or hazardous or severe. That means your system is safety critical. All right. The words might sound very vague. What do you really mean by catastrophic? But usually that means it's going to cost on human lives. Okay. But that's really the term they use in the industry. On the other hand, if I tell you that the system fell, it's only even major, minor, or simply no effects, that means it might just be mission critical at most. Okay, that's how you can define accordingly. All right, you can also find some other example about safety critical. You can see flight and also engine control, and these are the mission critical example, right? You can also go over them, all right? Yeah, I think this document is pretty handy, so you can definitely see the more context about this course. All right, if you want to see more, you can also look at this PDF. Okay, I'll leave that to you. Yeah, criticality level. That's really the main takeaway from this reading here. Okay. All right, so that's about the distinction between these two. And I would suggest we take a very short break by taking attendance, and then we'll continue a bit. All right, so before the break, we spoke about safety critical versus mission critical. Let's now just do a final little exercise. We'll do it together, okay? So when I say I want you to formally relate being safety critical and mission critical, right? It's really about, you can use a logical operator to actually relate the two claims. If I say one system is safety critical versus one system is mission critical, which statement is a logically stronger claim to make, right? That's something we want to talk about, all right? So back in 3342, you guys actually learned about, well, at least if you took it with me, so you learned about what does it really mean for a logical statement to be stronger than the other, right? That's something we also need when we talk about program verification, all right? So let me just mention very quickly, okay? So here, if I got two claims over here, so claim number one, if I say my system, let's just say S, right? Just a system name. Maybe a module, maybe a machine, is mission critical. Oh, sorry, wrong spelling. Is mission critical, right? And also, I say my system, the same system, is safety critical. All right. And if I want to relate them formally, I can use, for example, implication, right? We're going to talk about implication on Monday, right? So that's the trickier one among the different logical operators. But I'll just dive directly to the point. So I can say either P1, sorry, not P1, C1. Claim number one implies claim number two. Or I can say claim number two implies claim number one. Or I can say claim number one if and only if. C2. We'll talk about if and only if when we review the practical logic, right? So these are the three options you have. So which one should we choose? Ferrets?
Two.
Two? Yeah.
Claim number two implies claim number one. If
Yeah.
the system is safety critical, then that implies.
That should be mission critical. That sounds right to me. Okay. How do we visualize it? Right. So if you actually got this claim here, that's correct. So we are saying that if a system happens to be safety critical, then it must be mission critical at the same time, but not vice versa. All right. And based on this implication over here, which is going to be always true, we basically say that C2 is a stronger claim than C1. Stronger claim in the sense that there will be fewer systems which is going to satisfy this claim. Okay, meaning that there will be more systems that will be mission critical than systems that are safety critical. But I'll visualize that in just one moment. Okay. Okay, I'll just put some here. So that means fewer system satisfying claim number one, then systems satisfying. Oh, I beg your pardon. I really meant to say C2 over here. Okay. Yeah, because C2 is the antecedent over here. Fewer systems satisfying C2, which is safety critical, and then satisfying C1. Okay, fewer. And the way to visualize it is like this. Okay, let's say claim number. So let's say C2 is over here. All right, C2, and let's make a C1 over here. All right, just easier for you to see. Okay, So C2 is a stronger claim. So I'm going to put C2 over here. So C2, you can think about C2 is the claim that's going to be true for all the safety critical systems. Okay? So every system you can put under this circle over here, they are safety critical. The set of all safety critical systems. All right, C2. And C1 is actually we set a weaker claim because more system is actually going to satisfy that. So I'm just going to use this one here. So C1 is like a larger set. So think about C1. This will be the set of all mission critical system, meaning that there'll be more system that's going to be mission critical. So C1 is a weaker claim. And there'll be fewer systems satisfying the safety critical is a stronger claim. Okay? And then I'll say one more thing, and then we can move on. So think about C1 is a weaker claim, and C2 over here is a stronger claim. And we are going to revisit this visualization when we talk about program verification. But this one, think about it's more like an intuitive brush up, just for understanding this particular example here. But we'll get to here a little bit more formally later. All right, so now I want you to think about over here. Let me pick one point over here. Let me call that S prime. All right, it's a system called S prime. So this means this is a system that is mission critical but not safety critical. Agree? Because it's in the orange circle, but it's not in the pink circle, right? That's a kind of special system that is mission critical but not safety critical. And the reason that I want to point out S prime is, so when we review about the predicate logic starting from next Monday, maybe the second half, I still got some introductory stuff to finish, maybe in the first half on Monday. But when we talk about the review, we'll talk about proving strategy for different logical operators, like a truth table, and also proving strategy for different logical quantification. That's something we'll do next Monday. And S prime over here is a very nice one to illustrate. So what Ferris said, which is the correct answer, this one should always be right. So why is this not right always? All right. So you want to, let me just highlight that one there. Option number 1. So think, let me use maybe red over here. This implication here, so here, think about what option number 1 is saying. It's saying that if a system is mission critical, it must be safety critical at the same time. But it's not true. Because if I find this S prime as a weakness, I'm telling you, no, S prime here is a system that is going to satisfy C1 because it's mission critical, but it doesn't satisfy C2 because it's not part of the safety critical system, right? If you remember, the only way to make implication false is true implies false, right? That's also relevant to what we're going to talk about. Not true in general. And then you can think about over here, the S prime over here is a witness. Disproved by S prime as a witness. Right? So we're really trying to give you a little bit more formal intuition about safety critical and mission critical, right? They're not difficult. All right. All right, that's good. Let's see. All right, so formally relate. That's good. All right, just another standard for your reference point. And by the way, for the reference, for the standard names, you don't need to worry about it for the exam. I'm not going to ask you to memorize it, right? And don't even bother to put it on your data sheets. Don't waste the space, all right? So these are there just for your reference. If you have to refer to it later. But for the definition for mission critical, safety critical, you definitely have to know them, all right? Okay, so we got about 4 minutes. Let me see. Okay, just one slide. So formal methods is really about some method that's going to be mathematically rigorous, which is what we do in 3342 and also 4315, using practical logic. And then I will definitely show you how you can use the mathematically rigorous approach from 3342 versus 4315 to solve the same counter problem. That's something we'll do for sure on Monday. All right, just more standard over here. And that's really about the definition for the formal method. And the safety critical industry really try to advocate the use of formal methods to really certify your system. Okay, so you can read about this claim over here. Okay, and formal methods, since you're using mathematics to really specify stuff, as we said earlier, it will be unambiguous. There's no interpretations from different engineers, just the same implementation. If you say P and Q, it has a very unique meaning that nobody can misunderstood. Okay, precise and also verification. Okay, formal. Okay, good. Yeah, so safety property is again a very critical term for this course as well about invariance. So when you actually do lab number 1, you will also learn about how you can model check invariant properties. Okay. All right. I think I got about, let's see, over here we should be good. Okay, how about I stop here, and then I just got the final bit of the introduction and that small example I promised. We should be able to finish the introductory stuff in about half an hour on Monday, and then we'll do the review on the practical logic. But the slides are already there. You can feel free to go over them if you wish. Okay? But please make sure, get started with lab number 1. It's very fundamental, very critical. Thank you so much. I'll see you on Monday.